All right, house party, we are live. I am joined with two of our wonderful house party leaders, Hannah and Emma. How are you guys?
Hello.
Good.
But like, first things first, what do you guys miss the most about a house party?
Emma.
It has to be the games. I miss the floor is lava, to be completely honest with you.
Oh, it's Ultimate Jenga that does it for me. So missed.
The house party.
Competition.
Yeah, the house party games seem to be. I mean, I'm not sure why, because half the times all our leaders fall out because they're so competitive in the games, but seems to be the one thing that we can come back to. But anyway, we're going to jump in to week 2 of our wilderness series. Last week we had Dan on with us. If you have not seen that yet, you guys can catch that on our YouTube channel, and you can catch up on our introduction to what the wilderness series is all about. This week I have 2 new guests, and we're going to be talking about one of the heroes of the faith, Joseph. And so before we kind of jump in and discuss it, I'm going to kind of do a really quick snapshot overview of Joseph's story, and then we're going to kind of discuss that. And so it kind of starts in Genesis 37. It runs through to Genesis 42, which is 5 chapters of the Bible. Some quick maths there, and I'm going to attempt to do that in like 2 minutes. And so we will also send you guys through the engage section of this video, which you guys can dive into more and read through that for yourselves. But really quickly, Joseph was the son of Israel and Rachel. He was the favorite son of those guys, and so there was 11 brothers, and he was the favorite son, so much so that he got a wonderful multicolored coat, so which seemed to be quite a statement in those times. And so he also had this incredible gift of dreams and interpreting dreams, and he would have shared that with his brothers and with his family, and that was something that really did not bode well with his brothers. In fact, they plotted to kill him. They ended up not killing him. They had a better idea. They were like, if we sell him, we don't have to have blood on our hands, but we can also get money. And so they sold him to a guy called Potiphar in Egypt. He became a slave in his house. They took his cloak and they put blood on it, and they took it back to their father and said that he had been killed by a wild animal, probably a lion or a bear or something crazy like that. And he ended up living in a guy called Potiphar's house, and he was a house servant, and he was just helping out around the house. He was a very good servant. We read repetitively that God's favor was on him, and that he was faithful with what he had. He ended up rising in Potiphar's house to becoming a head servant. Then Potiphar's wife took a little bit of noticing of Joseph and decided to try to make some moves, and Joseph seen that coming and ran away. He fled from it. Potiphar's wife was a little bit offended by that, and then therefore made up a little bit of a story around that. Potiphar was very angry, and he was then thrown into jail. And kind of the same thing happened in jail. He began to be trusted with very little things, and he did that very well. It was clear that God was on Joseph's life, and he ended up being given more responsibility whilst he was in jail. And then he ended up finding himself in quite a unique opportunity where Pharaoh was having very interesting dreams, and they knew Joseph had a gifting in this, and so Joseph was brought towards Pharaoh. He ended up interpreting the dreams. Pharaoh knew that he was a man of God, knew that God was on his life. He then put into action what Joseph suggested based off his dreams, and which was 7 years of prosperity, 7 years of famine, and really he rose to high leadership in Pharaoh's house and was given that leadership. His brothers end up come back and they end up realizing where he was, and he forgives them, and that's kind of like the broad overarching story. But kind of really where this ties into the wilderness is that there are 2 main kind of segments for Joseph that are quite distinct wilderness seasons, which is when he is sold into slavery and he finds himself in Potiphar's house, and then when everything kind of hits the fan of Potiphar's house, he's then thrown into jail when he's totally innocent and when he didn't make any decisions to be there. In fact, quite on the contrary, he seemed very innocent and he seemed very faithful and very trustworthy, but yet found himself in 2 kind of distinct wilderness seasons, and either side of those wilderness seasons we have him being very gifted with dreams and with interpreting them, and then we also see him going through the wilderness and then interpreting them from a pharaoh and being elevated to a place of leadership. And so straight off the bat, I would love to know for you guys, Emma and Hannah, what really just jumped out to you guys as you were reading through the story of Joseph.
Yeah, I think for me there was so much you could get out of it, but there was this phrase that just kept repeating to me during the story, and it's this saying of "let your life speak," and it's this idea that if someone was an outlooker was looking into your life and you weren't able to introduce yourself or kind of explain your reasoning behind things or your thoughts and your feelings, what would your life look like to them, and what would it show, and how would they describe your life? And then kind of what stems from that is the question, like, would God show in your life? And if someone was looking in, would they be able to see God in your life? And I think Joseph is like a really good example of that phrase, let your life speak. We aren't really shown many of his thoughts and feelings, but like we're always shown his actions. And as Chris said, like it repeatedly says God's favour was on him. His actions always reflected God, and Joseph's life spoke God. Every situation he was in, he made the most of, and he listened and had a relationship with God during it, and I think it just really shows like his wisdom to not let his feelings dictate his actions. Like his actions were always what God wanted him to be, and I think it's also really like important to note that he didn't start doing this when he rose to like this position of leadership and power, and to be honest, he probably wouldn't have got into that position if he had. Like he got that position because through every step and every stage he let his life speak God. Even in the ups and downs when things went wrong, like he spoke God, and it's just like he did it from the get-go and not when he needed to, if you get me.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think the story's amazing and Joseph is such an amazing character, and I think what really I took from it specifically was, you know, throughout these wilderness periods, you know, Joseph was physically alone, and he was just thrown into these like unspeakable things, and he was trapped and he was a bit stuck. And I think like we can obviously really relate to that a bit now. Like we find ourselves alone, we're not able to go and see our friends, we're a bit stuck, and we're maybe feeling a bit trapped just in our house, in lockdown. But what also is so significant is that Joseph wasn't spiritually alone. So you know, the phrase, the text constantly says that the Lord was with Joseph, and as Emma and Chris said, like his favour was upon him the whole time. And so yeah, although he was physically alone, he wasn't spiritually alone, and God was with him in everything that he did. And this is just an incredible thought and such a challenge for us. You know, what would it look like if whatever we did in life, like God was with us and he was always present? And I just think that's a real amazing thought. And also just like Joseph's character in itself, like he is just completely obedient to what is going on around him. He's totally present and just willing to stick by God and just, you know, walk into every circumstance completely open and surrounded by God. And I think that's really encouraging for us as well, that no matter what we're walking into, like God is with us. And there's real power with that, and we should really hold on to that and have strength in that. He's just, you know, he's a very misunderstood character, and I think his brothers just give him a hard time because they don't understand his heart. And you know, he's a beloved son, and his father just wants to like you know, give him everything because he's just so loved. And it's really unfortunate that like human nature just, you know, pride and jealousy is such a real thing, and the brothers just don't understand Joseph, and they don't get what he's trying to, you know, they don't understand his gifts, and they want to just put him down constantly. And yeah, it's a real shame that like human nature just gets in the way of that. But like I said, you know, Joseph was disobedient the whole time, and yeah, and God really rewarded him, and yeah, I just think it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both you guys. Like, something that's really important to note is that at no point was like Joseph's motives in the wrong place. Like, he always had good intentions, and he just ended up in difficult circumstances because of that. And a large part of that he couldn't really control, from his brother selling him to Potiphar's wife making up stories about him. And like, if I kind of had those cards dealt to me, I think I think I'd probably give up fairly soon, in terms of like what the people have against me right now. You know, like, why am I going, like, doing everything right yet find myself in difficult circumstances? And I think like what you both shared, like his character to, number one, not be bitter, and to continue to be faithful with whatever he had and wherever he was, I think is amazing. And then I think also, like Emma, you said it, like, he let his life speak. Like, he never got on stages, or he never jumped on social media, because it wasn't there in those days, and pleaded his innocence to be like, this is crazy what's happening to me. But instead he was like, I can't control what happens, but I can control how I respond. And really, that built phenomenal character in him. You know, it was a developing incredible character, to the point whenever it comes to him then interpreting a dream, he's not punished for it like he was with all of his brothers, but he's actually elevated to a place of leadership. And that's a biblical principle where we talk about humility and how God elevates the humble, you know, and puts him to a place of leadership, and how humility is such an important thing. And so I guess, like, for you guys, like, the kind of the parallel we're drawing from this wilderness series is like understanding that we're in a season unlike anyone we've ever been in before. Like, it's very different. We're in lockdown, circumstances have changed. We can't really do too much about it. We kind of just have to decide how we're going to respond to it. From kind of like the lessons from Joseph, what's that look like for you guys in your lives, your day-to-day lives, and over these last few weeks? Hannah, you can kick us off.
Okay. Yeah, well, I kind of touched on like this whole feeling of being alone, and I think at the start of lockdown, there was a phrase that I felt like I was constantly using, and it was surviving and not thriving, and kind of was just like living my days as a means to an end, you know, just wanting to get through this. But I guess, you know, there was a real shift kind of halfway through lockdown when like something just changed, and I almost like felt a bit of personal responsibility on myself to actually just like shift this narrative. And Dan had kind of touched on this last week about, you know, the idea of personal responsibility, and you know, it is our responsibility to kind of change our mindset, and I think God really helps us with that as well. You know, if we come to him, and he'll help us, and yeah, once then, like, that shift sort of happened, I started to like explore things, and this whole idea of like identity, which is something like we talk a lot about in House Party, and it's really a constant theme that we want to you know, talk about with our young people. And I think now more than ever, like, I'm realizing that it's not about what I do, it's about who I am, and you know, the things that I do, or you know, my grades, or like what job I get, that doesn't define who I am. And especially in this season, it's really about who you're becoming, and who you see yourself as, and what God sees you as. So I think, yeah, this has become a real like season of honoring the process of just like who I'm becoming, and what God is calling me into and who He says I am. And I think like it's really clear that Joseph is just so strong in that, and he knows exactly who he is, and he knows that God is always with him, and like he just holds on to that. And then he's just blessed, like constantly, as you said, he's like elevated. And I think that is really encouraging. You know, we don't need to be, you know, like you said, having everything on social media or like doing these big things. It's just actually about who we are, and now more than ever it really is, because we can't do anything. Like you know, it's just us, and I think it's real just like a character building process. And yeah, I guess that's what I've kind of taken from it.
Yeah, for me, like I've got to experience lots in lockdown, and I know like me and Hannah have both been on a real cool journey with prayer, but I think like on reflection this all stems from one thing, and that's like my pace of life. And just for like context, before lockdown my life was crazy. It was just so rushed all the time, and my mum used to always say like, Emma, the only time you're home is to eat, it's to shower and get ready, and it's to go to sleep. So there was obviously like a drastic contrast from never being home to being home all the time in lockdown. And I think it's been a really good time for me to reflect and just to realise, like, before lockdown I was trying to fit God into my schedule instead of trying to fit into his schedule for me. And actually a couple of days ago I got sent a podcast. It was by Hannah, she's the queen of podcasts, and it's called Fight, Hustle, End, Hurry. She knows me very well, and basically they were talking about how it's real common saying when you're talking about someone's relationship with Jesus to say, oh, they're walking with Jesus, and then if you're kind of talking about if they've lost their faith, that they've walked away from Jesus. And they kind of turned this and said, but how many of us are actually walking in front of Jesus? And I think that really, really hit me. Like, if I kind of reflected and was like, if I was to go back in biblical times and was with Jesus, how many of his miracles and teachings would I have missed because I had tried to rush ahead of him and tried to get to the end point? Like, so many of Jesus's teachings were in the moment. For example, like we're doing the Matthew series at the minute, and the story of him going to heal the sick girl, and then someone touches him in the middle of the crowd and he stops and he doesn't rush. And like, I was thinking about it and I was like, I probably would have raced ahead to the house and missed that whole teaching. And I was kind of like turning that into now, like, how many of his miracles and teaching am I missing right now in life because I'm trying to rush ahead. And I think, yeah, it's just turning of the pace for me, to do it so that I'm walking with Jesus and not ahead. And at the minute that's a slow walk for me, and I know like there's going to be times where that's going to be a standstill, or there's going to be times that like I'm going to have to be a bit faster and maybe run, do you know what I mean? But it's doing that I'm always letting God guide my pace and always walking with Jesus in the pace instead of trying to get him to walk in my pace. And I think like as a consequence of that, like I've been able to see God in all aspects of my life during lockdown, not just in certain ones which I would have before. Like, I've always had a relationship with him and seen him in loads of areas, but I haven't seen him in all areas. But I think during lockdown I've been able to see him in all areas because I'm walking with him in all areas. So yeah, I was kind of just experiencing that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, I think probably all of us are looking forward to phases rolling on and for us getting back to seeing our friends and all that kind of stuff. And there's nothing we can do to make the hours and minutes and days go faster, but we can have two kind of attitudes around that, where we can just be like, we're just trying to rush through this and get to the end of it, or we can do what kind of both of you guys have really spoke about, like, and in terms of like just this opportunity it's been for you to rediscover your identity all over again and to hear God's voice in that, and for you to rediscover pace and see God in all things, not just certain things. Like, I think there's there's opportunity all over this season and this wilderness, and this is why we're doing this, because we believe in wildernesses is where we actually develop as individuals, as people, as followers of Jesus, and it's where our character gets developed. And I do believe that beautiful things come out of that. And I know for both of you guys, like what's happened in this season for you guys is not just for the season, but it's something that's going to go with you guys throughout seasons to come and throughout the rest of your lives. And so it's amazing to have that example of you guys sharing that. So guys, thanks so much for joining me. It feels like we're just back at house party, doesn't it?
Pretty the same thing, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, here, thank you guys so much for joining me. House party will be back next week, and be sure to check out our engage section so you can reflect and engage with everything we've kind of chatted about. So thanks so much. See you in a bit. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.